thank David and Pat, who, if it wasn't for them, I don't think we'd be here right now because One Life wouldn't be here. And they've been there from the start and helped tremendously with their time, treasure, and Pat even threw in the name One Life Fully Lived. Somehow, Pat, can you share your tattoo with us, one way or another?
One way, I guess. Well, hopefully I won't bust my butt here.
Here we go.
Standing on it. Please.
Come on, Hiban. Show us that tat.
Whoa.
What you all came for.
Can you see that?
There you go. That is where the name One Life Fully Lived came from. And even spelled it right. And it's absolutely perfect and absolutely apropos to start this off. So I'm going to let Hector do most of the interview here of David and Pat. Y'all have gotten to know me pretty well. I want you to know my GoBundance partners and know what, just see how different each of our visions of what our One Life Fully Lived looks like. But I can tell you, as partners of them, we've all helped each other tremendously attain each's version of what that is. We know each other intimately. They'll call me out on my shit, and likewise. And that's what good mastermind buddies do. So without further ado, Hector, take it away, rock the ship, and let's go, bro.
I want to do another formal introduction for those people who are catching this on the recording or who are gracious enough to be able to join us on the Book of Faces on Facebook. So we're joined by, you mentioned, or you guys got the chance to meet Tim Rhode, David Osborn, and Pat Hiban, and both of them are moguls in their own right. They are real estate moguls. They are best-selling authors. Tim mentioned that they are also founders of GoBundance. And I mentioned that before we started the recording that they're some of the most heart-centered people given the amount of success that they've had. And so I'm going to have them kind of share their stories in just a little bit. But one of the things that Tim was talking about before I started introducing people was are the One Life teachings. And the One Life Roadmap journal, which came out today, walks people through essentially the One Life teachings. And we're going to kind of cover those and get David and Pat's insights and figure out what they did to create their One Life Fully Lived. And the basis of living your One Life Fully Lived is this fulfillment triangle. And we know that climbing a mountain, right? Climbing the success mountain is one thing to do, but once you achieve a certain amount of success, a lot of people are looking for that next mountain, which is fulfillment. And what we found is that fulfillment is often at the center of finding one's passions, something that they're passionate about, their talents, and where there's opportunity in the marketplace. And it's where it's that unique combination and almost alchemy that allows someone to kind of find their niche, to find their groove. And so I'd love to turn it over to David and Pat and just kind of hear how you guys, how did this play into your life? Because all of you guys have taken similar, albeit, a little different routes to your success and to building your wealth. But I think that you guys definitely were passionate throughout all of it. You guys obviously were talented, and they're proven to be a lot of opportunity there. So do either of you feel confident enough, comfortable enough going first and kind of taking us behind that story of how you found your groove and kind of, utilized your talents and strengths to go out there and create something in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I can go, Pat. If John Maxwell has a great quote that I've learned later in life, and he says people go from struggle to success to significance. And the interesting thing about that journey is that for me, when I was in the struggle, all I could think about was the struggle. I didn't think about success. I just thought about the struggle. So I was working in real estate, building my offices. I knew where I wanted to be, but I didn't really think about what that would be like. So that part of the journey was the struggle. And that was the longest part, probably. That's grinding it out and getting new skills and, cutting off the parts that don't work or don't fit. For instance, as an example, I was a procrastinator in high school and college. I didn't really work that hard. Well, that doesn't work when you're an independent person working for yourself. You've got to learn how to work hard. So I had to sort of cut off the part of me that liked to procrastinate and find a new, highly productive part. And then, so in the struggle, I was fully absorbed in the struggle. And then when I got to success, I was pretty absorbed in success. It was pretty nice to get there and be successful. And one day you realize you don't really notice it. It kind of crept up on me like, wow, all of a sudden I was like, wow, I've succeeded. Like I'm actually making money. I don't really have to do the, 70, 80 hour, 60 to 80 hour weeks anymore. I've kind of made some money and I don't have to, and that's enjoyable for a while. And then all of a sudden you realize, well, actually it's not that enjoyable. Like it was almost more fun in the struggle than it is in the success. And I think that's when significance starts permeating your life. And for significance, it's where can I make a difference and what can I do differently? And, I was talking to a guy on a podcast yesterday and he said at the end, look, how can I help you? And what can I do to help you? I said, I'm here, I'm in the significant stage of my life, just being on your podcast, trying to help you build your audience, maybe dropping one or two bits of something that'll help somebody from my story. That's reward in and of itself enough. And I think that's where life becomes most meaningful, is when you're actually in the significance phase. But I guess my lesson from my journey was that each phase I was in, I didn't really pay attention to the other phases, if that makes any sense. And now that I'm in significance, I still get pulled into struggle every now and then when something goes wrong in some corner of my life. But it's way easier because A, I have the success, and B, I've been through so many failures and so many battles. They just don't really faze me like they used to, if that makes any sense. Like a crisis 20 years ago that would set me up not sleeping for a week, might tick me off for an hour and a half. It might come back and forth, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. But it's the battles that I fought through those 15 or so years of really grinding it out that give me the peace I have now that I've arrived through success to significance. So that's a little analogy for you. I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but
yeah, absolutely. Pat, do you want to take us through your journey of figuring out where your groove was and how to use that to make money?
Well, I think with me, it was a little different than what a lot of people think, or what it is with a lot of people. With the groove was in order to how to make money, where my groove was making money. Like I think, and I don't think this is necessarily wrong that they teach us in a lot of the schools, that you should follow your passion and do what you really want to do. Because you should, right? You should be happy. Fact of the matter is, though, it's very hard to make a lot of money, being a second grade phys ed teacher. I mean, I would have done that, right? But I couldn't make the jam that I wanted to make, right? And so I really had a passion for the money. I got into real estate at 21 years old, and I was the farthest from someone that would walk someone through a house and say, oh, isn't this a lovely painted fireplace? And can't you see yourself cooking steaks out on this beautiful, mahogany deck or whatever it was? My attention to detail sucks. And I'm just not into houses, right? I'm not, but I'm into people. I like people and I like money. And so my whole thing was, I want to sell as many houses as I can to make as much money as I can. And that became my quote unquote groove, which is what you asked for. What was my groove? I think my groove was making money. And I had a lot of friends that were going into selling things, but they were making $200-300 a sale. And I saw in real estate, you can make $2,000-3,000 a sale. So for me, logically, it just made more sense from a monetary standpoint to sell things where I could make $3,000 every time. Nowadays, it's $12,000-15,000 every time, compared to if you're selling cars. I just bought a car, and I was talking to a Subaru salesman. He's like, I make $300 a car no matter what. I don't care what you do, what you negotiate, whatever. She's making $300 as a Subaru salesman. The average real estate agent makes 15,000 or 11 or whatever it is. I don't know what it is, 8. But so that just made mathematical sense to me, is my point. So my groove was, that's what I got into. That's what I stayed with. I became really good at follow up, staying in touch with people, and just giving first class service, just being obsessed with every deal and making people happy so that they bought something, settled on something, and I got paid something. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah. David, I'd love to throw it back to you. I know that you had a unconventional, for lack of a better term, path to your career. Can you kind of take, I think one thing that a lot of people are drawn to about One Life is that we encourage people to, to do their weird or to, find and, whatever their groove is. Can you talk about, what that process of figuring out where you were gonna, how you got to landing on your career, how you got to, choosing real estate as your path?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I was the son of a military dude. My dad was an Army officer, eventually went in as an enlisted guy, but took his college credits and spent 30 years in the Army. So we were like the middle class, and, it wasn't a bad life. We were always on Army bases and in military housing. And my mom didn't work. She was a housewife. And, he was a San Antonio boy, so he retired back to Austin, Texas. And when he got back to Austin, my mom decided to go make a couple extra bucks and get a job. My dad was going to get his PhD in history or, warfare or some militaristic PhD. I can't remember exactly. So she went and got a job in real estate, and she happened to join a small company run by a guy called Gary Keller. And Gary was 26 years old and I was 16. And I remember my mom got into real estate and I never saw her again. I sometimes used to joke that I got into real estate just so I could hang out with my mom some, because she got in and she started working 12 hours a day. And, I think mom had something to prove. She didn't have a college degree or anything. She's just a really nice, classy, really amazing woman, actually. And just had some fire burning in her that made her want to make something happen. So she got into real estate at Keller Williams. Now, I'd done a lot of different things. I had a lawn mowing company. I'd worked construction. I was a bagger. And one of the things, I think your whatever your groove is, if you want financial freedom, it has to have a paycheck attached to it. And that's what Pat was talking about. I was a very fast grocery bagger, but no matter how good I got at bagging groceries, I wasn't going to reach financial freedom. And I think in America, financial freedom should be a goal for almost everybody. There's two ways to do that. And one is low risk, where you just take a job, you live well below your means, and you save a lot of money. And that's good. That's a great way to go. And then the second way is to take a little more risk and put yourself in a position where you've got, more income. And sales, I think, is a place where you generally get rewarded more for your actions. So when I got into sales, and up till then, I'd been a pretty marginal student of life. I was just kind of coasting through stuff. I liked working. I always enjoyed working, but I never really paid attention in school. I didn't really see the reason for it. I couldn't understand why I was learning trigonometry or, geography or stuff like that. So then I got into business, though, and I'm in sales, and I'm in real estate sales. And all of a sudden, I found that everything I learned and I applied, it worked. So if I wanted to be a better agent for my consumers, for my clients, if I learned a few scripts, people hear scripts and they think that's manipulative, but it really isn't. If you tell a client, hey, I'm going to show you 7 houses today, I just want you to remember your favorite 2, that's a script, but that's doing them a favor. Because otherwise they end up at the end of the day going like, I want the house, the kitchen in the 3rd house, and I want the backyard of the 4th house, and I want the bedroom of the 5th house. You can't have that. You only get a choice. Here's 7 houses. You can choose, one, your favorite and your second favorite, in case we make an offer and we don't get the favorite. And, so I began to learn how powerful scripts were and how scripts could help me serve my clients better. And then I was just pretty lucky, really. I was at a company that was growing really fast, and they needed people to grow with them. And I put my hand up and I was like, hey, I want to go open franchises. I don't want to just keep being in sales. And so I went up and started opening franchises, and it was a heck of a journey. I mean, I grew right alongside the company. And so, Rick Pitino, who's the legendary basketball coach, I'm going to screw it up because I don't watch a lot of basketball. I think it's Duke, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's Kansas City. I don't know. It's something like that. But he always said, maybe it was Louisville, but he always said, put yourself in a position to win. And that's what I tell people too. You got to put yourself in a position where you can win. And Sheryl Sandberg wrote Lean In. She said, you want to be part of a rocket ship, because in a rocket ship, there's more jobs and opportunities than there are people. And so therefore you get more and more opportunity and more responsibility, versus a fully developed organization. there's more people than opportunity. And then all of a sudden it becomes around politics and stuff like that. So if you go into an organization, that's where I'd go. If you go to work for yourself, I think that's the greatest of all opportunities, because really nothing shows you more the skill you've developed than being an entrepreneur, because it's autobiographical. No one cares. There's no one you can't hide in your job. You can't hide in your cute cubby and wait for your paycheck. When you're running a business, whether it's buying a Domino's pizza franchise or, you know, starting your own consulting and coaching company or being a real estate agent, your results are there's no paycheck. So your results are a direct result of, you know, what you've learned up to that point. And then I became an avid student of life. My first job was to sell franchises, and I wasn't very good at selling them, so I kept having to buy them. And eventually I got better at selling them and buying them, like you do when you're all in for something. And I was all in, and ended up being the largest franchise owner in the company. But it's really a dumb luck more than anything, lack of skill in selling franchises. If I could have got people to buy all those franchises early on, I'd have sold them all. But I couldn't, so I just bought them to keep my development schedule. If you didn't develop the territory, then there was always the risk they would take it away from you. So that was my journey. It's been a good one. Like now I'm a massive student of life. I'm listening to books on tape all the time. I'm reading books. I'm, you know, tuning into things like One Life or GoBundance. There's just not, I just spend a bunch of money trying to pick up additional nuances, because it really makes all the difference. What you know and how you apply it will absolutely determine, you know, your destination. And some of that we get through luck or privilege or opportunity. I mean, I was very lucky. My dad was very strict and pretty tough on us, but he always sent us to school, and he was tough about getting pretty good grades. So obviously I wasn't a great student, but I was in good schools and I got reasonable grades, like C's. I usually got C's. And then he wanted me to go to college, so he pushed me through college. I kind of wanted to go to work, but I went ahead and got out of UT with a 2.2, I think. So some of that comes from luck, but the rest of it's just up to you. Like there's a million guys that don't succeed. And when I was at the company, there's like 1,000 people there, and weren't many people putting their hands up and taking the opportunity. So I think that's where it comes down to your decisions for your destiny and where you choose to go. And I think one thing about me not being a great athlete or getting any satisfaction from that, and moving a lot as a kid, military brat, moved 10 times by 14. The one thing I didn't do is ever quit on me. I was always like, why not me? Why can't I be successful? I mean, I always wanted to be the guy that caught the football or kicked the winning goal too, but that never happened. But it was like, why not me? And it kind of like became a mantra for my life. Like there's always something new that I can learn. And if I do it right and apply myself and keep getting back up, why can't I have the success that I see other people have? And eventually it came true for me.
That's beautiful. I'd like to go back to the teachings of, and after the fulfillment triangle is the One Life CORE4. And what I think is really unique, and what a lot of people are drawn to One Life about, is the fact that it's a holistic, there's a holistic approach, and it's something that can help people both personally and professionally. And for those people who aren't familiar with the One Life CORE4, it's vision, finances, relationship, and wellness. And we see these as the essentials to living that one life fully lived. And as a little shameless plug, this is what the One Life Roadmap Journal Adult Edition walks people through. And so there's a section on each of these, and it helps them to walk through and identify all the important things in each of these 4 different pillars. And so you can get yours at onelifefullylived.org/Amazon. But I'd love to know, David or Pat, either of you can feel free to take this one, how that how that idea of a holistic approach to success has played into your life, or if you've seen it. I mean, there's a lot of the examples of the people who are extremely successful in one area, but we see their lack thereof in others. And I think that all of you guys, or both of you guys, Tim included, have taken great lengths to level up in all of these areas. So how has that kind of holistic nature of this whole journey played out for either of you?
I think we've seen a lot of people in our time who didn't practice it and had shitty lives. You know what I mean? Like don't look good now. They aren't in good shape, but not physically, but financially and relationship wise and things like that. I almost think you have to, I mean, you could be heavily focused on one of the things in the on your list there. Like, let's just use the most obvious, finances. You could be heavily focused on that for only so long before it's going to catch up with something else in your life, right? That's not getting the attention that it should be getting. So I think that the sooner you could start thinking about all those things, the better, all at once, the better. You know, and I was lucky that I had David and Tim, and all three of us were focused on making sure we stayed in our relationships with our spouses, making sure we saved enough money and invested wisely, making sure we stayed healthy, all those things, and not just successful at one thing, but successful at all aspects that are important.
And I don't know
Yeah.
how, just to add on one more thing, I don't know how much you feel comfortable sharing, but I know recently you made a big just pivot in your business and life and stuff. Can you speak to that and maybe taking drastic steps if you find yourself, not paying attention to certain aspects or certain areas of your life, and what that might look like for somebody?
Yeah. I mean, so you mean me selling the podcast? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you
Rickshaw.
had to just have a big pivot in your business
Yeah.
and life. So
I just, at the end of the year, end of last year, I basically cleaned myself out of a bunch of stuff that I had that really wasn't making me any money or wasn't exciting to me anymore. I had a real estate team that I had sold to a partner and was making a profit margin off of for about a decade. And I decided just to close it down because my license was going to expire and I just didn't want to go and take the continuing ed. And I just didn't want to be an agent anymore. I figured it'd been 30 some years and that was enough. And I had a property management company that really didn't make much money, but had a bunch of houses with it. And I just gave it to the guy that was running it and said, here, you take this. And then I had a podcast that was, very successful that David bought that was, 850 episodes. And it had a lot of listeners, but it wasn't fun for me anymore. I didn't get excited about doing the shows anymore. So pretty much all in the same month or same couple of months, last quarter of last year, I just cleaned them all out and they're off the books, right? They're completely off my books. With that came a lot of liberation. And, at this same time, I wanted to stay busy because, those things were eating up some time, a couple of days a week, let's say. And so, I live in Folly Beach, South Carolina. It's a little beach town right outside of Charleston. And every time I would go to Charleston, I'd see these guys riding these pedicabs, which are bicycles with seats on the back. They're like three wheels, one in the front and two in the back. And I was always like, man, that's what I want to do. That looks fun as shit. All those guys are in great shape and they're talking to people and meeting all these tourists and fun people. So I actually met a guy, a friend of mine's son came over for dinner and he actually did that. He was a student at college at Charleston. I was like, hey, Teddy, I was like, get me a job there, man. So he set me up with the guy and I did it before COVID. I was doing it 2 to 3 nights a week. I was, giving people a ride for tips in downtown Charleston, driving them around. And it was one of the funnest jobs I ever had because you get to meet all these cool people and you stay in great shape. It kept me out of the bars. You know what I mean? It kept my mind focused because I had to memorize all these streets of downtown Charleston. I didn't really know the city, and someone would say, hey, can you take me here? And you don't want to look like a dummy by putting in Google Maps. So you try to remember it in your head how to get to that restaurant or whatever. So that was really good exercise for my mind as well. It had a lot of benefits. And I'm going to go back to it after the summer. But anyway, so that's what I did, and I love it.
David, you want to chime in on kind of the holistic side of or, you know, your approach
Yeah.
to the holistic side of it?
I mean, I think when Pat and I met, we were very accountable, but it was all around first just working hard, and then, you know, making money. And then eventually we kind of shifted towards more, you know, investment opportunities. And then when we met Tim was already semi-retired, and he'd been a famous agent in the 80s, and he was living in the woods, getting the goods, as he always likes to say. And I think we added into our kind of philosophy as a group. The three of us were like brothers from different mothers. Ironically, Pat lived in Maryland, Tim lived in California, I lived in Austin, Texas. So we had like the whole, you know, East Coast, West Coast, Central kind of thing. And we just added health to the game plan. And, you know, when I heard Richard Branson talk one time, someone asked him, what's the number one thing you could do to increase your business success? And he said, work out. And it really, you know, didn't sink in with me, you know, until I met Tim, about how important keeping in great shape is. I'm in better shape now in my 50s than I was in my mid 30s. I got lower cholesterol, lower body fat, lower BMI. And it's all just through disciplines that I've added of getting outside and getting the goods, or exercising on a regular basis. And then on the relationship side, yeah, of course. I mean, the number one, if you want to have a whole life, you know, the worst thing is, you know, when you're like a billionaire, but your kids don't talk to you, or you're a billionaire divorced 5 times. I mean, that just doesn't seem to me like a life that I would want to have, or a life worth living. And I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to judge divorce. Life's hard, life's complicated, but at the end of the day, pouring into the relationship, pouring into the kids, you can't really just focus on one leg of the stool. Otherwise you'll just be out of balance. And I think we learned that together. And I think probably I was out of balance early on for a while, for a number of years. And just, you know, Tim, Pat, and a bunch of courses we've taken. And being married, as all of you guys know, is easy. It's the easiest thing in the world. And that's a joke. No, it's a tough thing. And you've just got to keep pouring into it and figuring out what works. It's not like a business where you say, hey, everyone, we're climbing this hill, let's go. And you look back at everyone's climbing with you. When you tell that to your family, you look back, there's one's riding a bike and one's watching TV. They're like, we ain't going to go up that hill with you. You go have fun. You're like, oh, okay, this is a different relationship. And then being a kid too, like, you know, Pat's got another tat on his arm that says love is spelt time. Is that right? Or presence? I don't remember either.
Yeah. Presence.
And that's really what it is.
It would wrap all around my arm.
Love is spelled time. And really with the kids, it's as simple as that. Like, I mean, it's just spending time with them, and that's all. Not about what you do or don't do. It's just about being with them when they're doing whatever they're doing. So, you know, the great thing about business success is once you've figured it out, it takes a lot of time. But once you kind of cut off the unnecessary parts, like the part of you that wants to complain, the part of you that's a victim, the part of you that's like, you know, I don't know, apathetic about stuff, you can apply that same thing to relationship, to being with your kids. You know, once you've kind of developed that productivity muscle, which I didn't have at first, like I said, but I do now pretty high level. So I can, just say like, okay, I'm going to make it. As an example, recently, my daughter, my 11-year-old, she said she wanted to learn guitar, and she'd said it. She got the guitar in Christmas, and she just hadn't really been playing it. So I was like, what can I do to help this situation? COVID helped too, because it slowed my life right down. Right. So I was like, you know what, I'll learn the guitar right along with her. So we've done 15 out of the last 20 days. We've taken a guitar lesson together. We played Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. We've been learning Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. We've been learning Rose from a Thorn by Seal or whatever. And we're just like jamming together, and we're both terrible. She's way better than me. You want to see the difference between an 11-year-old brain and a 53-year-old brain. She picks it up much quicker. We're sitting down by the lake singing. I used to think I could sing, but I clearly can't, because when I hear myself now, I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds terrible. But we don't care. We're just having time. And she's getting better at it. And now she's like, hey, let's play guitar. And that's the gift of just productivity and accountability, which I've developed in plenty of, to being with my kid, you know, and being present to what she wants to have happen, and just being a little bit of a training wheels for her, if you will, to go on her life's journey. So it's kind of cool the way it all ties together in a holistic manner.
I want to get to one of the questions that came in from Eric Olson, and it revolves or it relates to our core 4 pillar of vision. And one of the things that I always get compliments on is the One Life shirt that says "Dream it, plan it, live it," and people always, you know, that for some reason it's a novel idea to them, which is just kind of interesting. But I think that it's something that's unique and maybe so simple. And his question is, he says, what's the key to scale or delegating, and at what points on the journey do you recommend starting a family, and how does that play into becoming an entrepreneur? So I think, you know, I'd love for you, either of you guys, to speak to, you know, thinking about or talking about how you guys make, you know, big life decisions, you know, or how you guys choose. One of the other questions that came in from Mr. B is, how do you choose between income opportunities? You know, how do you choose which path to take? And, you know, so can you guys talk a little bit about what that process is for you for actually creating that vision and, you know, kind of, you know, making those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in first because I'll go quick. You know, for me, the relationship, Pete, was just like the struggle part. Like, I didn't really plan it. It just kind of showed up in my life. And I had a wonderful girlfriend who'd been with me a while, and then my dad got sick with cancer. And when he got sick with cancer, she was amazing and stood for me and stood really well. So I was like, hey, let's have a kid. So she said, sure. So we had a kid. And then all of a sudden I had a family. And the next thing you know, I had to figure out how to manage a relationship. But so that all came, you know, to me, just like the struggle. I can't say I planned it all out, but, you know, maybe Julian will do a better job planning it out than me. But what I do is plan what is. So I look at what is now, and I look at each one of my kids, and I have 3, and I got a wife, and I'm always asking myself, what would make their lives happier, easier, better? How could I factor that into my overall vision? And I'm very committed to a vision for my business. And I think it's very easy to come up with a vision for your business of, okay, I did this much last year. I'm going to increase that by 20%. I'm going to increase my expenses by only 10%. I'm going to keep a budget. All of that is a process that everyone listening to this can learn. I know that because I'm a C student. I wasn't great at math, but I know how to run a budget and run a business now. I've just through application and applying myself. And then, you know, on the other question of like where to choose to invest your time, I have something called the opportunity matrix. If I'm looking at an investment, the first thing I look at is the human being I'm dealing with. Are they honest? Do they have integrity? Do they have a track record? Track record is very important of success. Is it a crazy high flyer? I mean, your return's probably going to be related to the risk. So if it sounds like something's going to make you 100 to 1 return, you're probably actually going to make 0. And if you're going to make 6 to 8 to 10 to 12%, you can live very well making between 10 and 15, 8 and 15% a year on every investment you do, as long as you manage the losses and don't have a lot of losses. It's amazing to me how many people I see will take a flyer on like a new Bitcoin company or some new startup, and you got to realize that 999 out of 1,000 of those go nowhere. So you're better off just sticking with base hits. But I look at the person involved, and that's the first thing. And then I look at the opportunity, and can I understand it? Is in a place I think I could make money? And for me, that almost always boils down to real estate. And when I've expanded outside of real estate, I've had way more losses than wins. And when I've stayed inside real estate, I've had way more wins than losses, just because everyone needs a place to live or a place to do business or something. So that's my answer to those 2 questions. Pat?
Yeah, I like everything David said. I mean, I think the most, how he said basically that you could lose everything on a risky bet. We see that all the time. Warren Buffett says, rule number 1, don't lose money. Rule number 2, don't forget rule number 1. And that's so true. Like David said, if you're making 8 to 15% on all investments, you're killing it because you're not losing any money. But what happens with a lot of people is they'll, you know, invest money and then lose it. And then you're never going to make 8 to 15% because you're starting out with this negative number. They don't see it like that. So just be careful. That's all I got to say about that.
What about the relationship thing, Pat? He also asked, like, did you plan? You were more planned than me around family. So how did you integrate that into being an entrepreneur?
You know, I always had a deep-seated desire to be a really good father, like a focused father. A father who like knew what was going on, and all this, you know, goes back, of course, whenever you trace anything back to the relationship I had, you know, with my dad and my parents and stuff like that. I didn't know I was going to be a father, you know, right away, but you know, as I started thinking about getting married, I said, yeah, absolutely, I want to have kids. And then when we started talking about having kids, I knew that I wanted to work less. And then when we had kids, I knew that I had to work less. And children are very addicting. You know, the more time you spend with them, the more time generally you want to spend with them. You know, a lot. I understand if you're a mom and you have 7 kids and you don't have any adult conversation, that's a completely untrue statement. But I think for me as a father, the more I spent with them, the more I wanted to spend with them. So I started taking more and more time off. For me, like David said, it came more naturally, not from a learned behavior, but just from a very conscious behavior on my part.
Yeah. Tim said that that's the cool thing about being self-employed is that you can work them into your schedule. And I think that's a big reason why so many people who are in the One Life community look to entrepreneurship. One of the questions that came in from Christine, it revolves around one of our next pillars, which is relationships. And her question, she says, she wants to, I just want to make sure I say it correctly. How do you find others to hold you accountable? She said she's outgrown her current group in that realm, and she'd love to have some other big dreamers, implementers in her life to cheer her on. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Pat and I will probably answer this exactly the same way. You will outgrow people a lot in your life if you are on the path of growth. That's just the way it is. People don't really want to grow. One of our early teachers said, if you aren't, you know, I'll take what he said and apply it to what someone else has said. If you're the same person 5 years from now than you are today, you failed. Like, life is about perpetual motion, perpetual growth. I don't expect to be the same human in 10 years that I am today. So based on that, you know, if you choose that path, which is just an ongoing path, then you're going to have to find new peers on a regular basis. And me and Pat and Tim are lucky enough to have kind of been on the journey together for a long time, but you do leave a lot of people behind, and, you know, it's not bad or good. Like, maybe people are smart just to have a regular life and a regular job and enjoy their barbecues on the weekends and do whatever they do. But if you have the path of restlessness and the path of entrepreneurship, the only way to find new people is to go to mastermind groups, you know, join different groups, and just be constantly around people that challenge and raise you up. I've consciously improved my network probably every year for 25, 30 years. And, you know, now a bunch of my mentors in Austin run large companies. They're CEOs. They're very established, very respected in Austin. And I just consciously reached out to them and built relationship with them, first off as a mentee and eventually as a peer. And that's a never ending journey, by the way. Until you get, well, that's not true. I guess there's a point when you just decide to diminish, and that's okay too. Like, at some point I expect I'll be more grandpa. And when that happens, I won't need to know anybody who's moving and shaking. I'll be into love and presence, hopefully, and just looking out for my little ones. But I think until you decide,
find mentors in that space too.
Yeah, probably will. You're right, Pat. That's a good point.
I think you're always looking for mentors, and it just, you know, just depends which direction you want to go. And everything David said is true. And the interesting part about that answer to that question, Hector, is I met David at a mastermind. Like, I met him at a mastermind for real estate people. And then David and I went to another mastermind for business finances, and we met
Tim. Yeah.
So that's not just, you know, a cliche answer. That's the reality of our life.
I'd like to touch on that. You know, I barely graduated high school. I never went to college. And I don't know the number, but it's somewhere between 500 and 1.5 million masterminds and coaches and all the different stuff. And if I wouldn't have gone to that one, I wouldn't have met Pat, who introduced me to David, and it changed the game. You just never know where that, you know, that lucky break, if you will, is going to happen that takes you on a whole new course. And Christopher Lochhead says, must be present to win. Think about that. That's all I got.
Yeah, and if you're looking around and you're like the smartest guy you know or whatever, you've got a problem. Like you're in the wrong room. It's okay to be around people that are peers where you up and down, you're in the same general direction. But if you're like at the top of the mountain and you're a little pond or whatever, you're in a small or medium pool and you're the biggest fish, you got to go find a different pool. Otherwise you'll start stagnating. And again, if you want to do that at some point, like there's a time to diminish. My mom's 85. I don't expect her to be trying to increase her business skills or business sense at this point. But for most of us, you just want to keep expanding. And, Tony Robbins was great for me early on. Tony Robbins was a guy that taught me how to sort of get motivation for myself. I told you, I procrastinated. I didn't really have the energy to the movement, the productivity. And that stuff was great for me early on. And then I felt like I'd kind of grown through that. Like I thought, okay, well, this is good for inspiration and motivation. But now that I've kind of got the engine running, once you get the dynamo going inside, then it's like information, knowledge. We're like, where do I apply my energy to take my life to a new space? And that's where we tried, Fred Gross, and then Money Matters, which I don't think exists anymore. And to this day, I'm in Tiger 21, which is a mastermind right now, which is just a bunch of successful entrepreneurs. And I've gotten a lot of great relationships and great input from out of that. And I'm constantly looking for the next thing of where I can expose myself to people that can bring extra light into my life.
This is a perfect segue into another plug for the One Life Roadmap Journal. And the reason I say that is because it actually walks through and asks you, to identify all these different key relationships in your life, whether that's mentors or your tribe or these people that you're learning from or getting support from. And I think the challenge is that a lot of people don't think about that. And that's why this tool is so important. So you can get yours at onelifefullylived.org/Amazon. I don't want to encourage you guys, anybody who has any questions, to throw them down there, because we're coming to the fourth quarter.
George has a great question in there.
Yeah, I just read George's question. It's directed at me, so let me answer it real quick. When COVID first hit, I was telling everyone I wasn't even going to look for deals for 6 to 9 months. Now, I caveat that because we're always doing deals, but I was just trying to keep my dry powder and see what happens. But I also have a fund that buys continuously. And George, what you're saying is true. Like we tried to tighten up our underwriting to be a little bit more aggressive, and the deal flow just dried up. And in fact, a lot of people just aren't selling right now. So the inventory has shrunk. And so, yeah, deals are still hot and still flying off the market. I'm still waiting to see what happens in 2021. So George, I think you can't fight the Fed, right? So right now the Fed is pouring money into the economy. There's a lot of stuff going on right now that I think makes, and has been for a long time, let's be honest. I mean, the government's been printing money for a long time, which seems to be okay. We'll see until it isn't, I guess. But I still want to see what happens in 2021. So for my ongoing operations that I do, we're still deploying, and we've kind of softened our underwriting back to where we were before. We're still pretty aggressive. I've always been cautious in the underwriting. I don't like to buy a lot when the market is booming. I prefer to buy when it's down. But I have been a little surprised that this market has been so resilient and things have been so strong. And I still think that the prudent thing to do if you have a limited amount of capital, which I suspect most of us on the call do, and I do as well, is just to see where we all shake out after the election. Remember, politicians want to get elected. They'll do anything they can to keep the economy looking good in an election year. So we have to see what's going to happen in 2021, or at least that's my approach. So that's what I'm doing. You don't have to do anything. You do whatever you want, but I'm still going to be very alert and very conservative until 2021. But there are some interesting nuances too. I do think it's fascinating how well VRBO has popped back, and it kind of makes sense that if we're not doing international travel, that might be a hot little sector. But yeah, for right now, I'm keeping my powder dry, and I'm doing investing, but only on a really good deal basis, which is hard to find right now.
Beautiful. Pat or Tim, do you guys want to talk about, for those of you guys who are catching the replay, George Batar, one of our longtime One Life Contributor Club members, asked about David's thoughts on investing. So Tim or Pat, do either of you guys want to speak to your outlook?
You go next, Pat. What are you doing post-COVID with your investing?
Yeah, I'll answer that, and I'll answer Laura's on there too, because it's a longer answer. Mine is nothing, right? I'm not real, and any investing that I'm doing is all liquid investing, which means, I might put money into a certain stock or a certain, silver mining company or something like that, that I think is strategic in a way. Oil, silver, stuff like that, on a broad sense, I think are strategic. Mathematically, they're more apt to win in my mind than just a general mutual fund or something. But all that stuff I could cash out, like, with one computer click. I'm all in control of it. So I consider that cash, right? I mean, really, I consider that cash. What I consider not cash is, buying an investment that I know is not going to sell for another 10 years. That would be illiquid. So I'm not doing anything illiquid. My life used to be all illiquid. Like literally, I would have no liquidity. My liquidity is probably 12 times as high as it has been on average in the past, if that makes sense. And by the end of the year, it'll be probably 20 times as high as it has been in the past. Liquidity, meaning it could be cash in a day. I could literally get it all in bills within 10 days, let's say. Absolutely nothing. Basically hanging out, waiting to watch what David does, basically. That's what I'm doing.
What about the second question, Pat? You were going to ask.
The second question, she said, how did I do it? Well, so I sold houses. I was 21 when I started, 23 when I bought my first house. I earned commissions, didn't spend anything, right? Like I lived in a place I shared with 4 other guys or something, paid like $200 a month for a room. I was extremely frugal, used car, everything, right? And just saved money. And then I bought it with the FHA loan. And then I actually, the next year bought another one with an FHA loan, which means, if you don't know what that means, it means like 2.3% down or whatever it is, low down payment, as opposed to a lot of money. Because your question was little or no money. That's how I did little or no money. Then I bought another one, put it in my wife's name, who was my girlfriend at the time. We put it in her name. And so then within 2 years, we had 2 houses. The one we rented out, the one we lived in. Then we moved out of that the next year. And then we rented both of them out and lived in another one. So I was always kind of like hacking the system. Even when I bought my house, my first house, with the 2.5% down, I rented out the basement and rented out one of the rooms. So I literally lived there for free. They gave me enough money to give to her because she didn't make enough money to really qualify for her first house. So I gave her the money and kind of cheated on that one. And then that's how I did it. So that hopefully answers your question specifically.
Hey, I just realized that's Laura Daly, a friend of ours and a family friend. So I didn't realize. I just saw Laura. Laura, it's great to see you, I guess, if that's the correct term, on this Zoom call. The other thing you can do, remember, you've got a lot of runway ahead of you. You can make a bunch of money if you don't have money by being an expert in, say, for instance, real estate, and getting a piece of what's called inside investing. And inside investing is when you bring a deal to people with money. I just got one a couple of days ago that's a VRBO, interestingly enough, which I may or may not do. But basically the guy that brought it to me is like, hey, this is an oceanfront property. It's one area that's zoned to do VRBO all the time, whereas most of the city's zoned only 2 or 3 weeks out of the year. And I want you to put up all the money and I'm going to keep a percentage of it. So that's another way you can do it with no money, is you can become an expert in the field. But I do agree with Tim. You're so young that actually, sales is such a great learning place. And the sooner, go work at Cutco, go work at, some place where you're learning how to sell early, and where you don't really get paid unless you succeed. And that's for a young person. I think that's just an incredible way to start getting used to working for yourself. And then as far as making money, it's just like Pat said, hacking. My first house, I had 2 roommates. I lived in it for a couple of years. Then I rented the whole thing out, moved back into an apartment because I didn't like mowing the yard. So it really is a house hacking process, and today I couldn't have roommates because I'm too old and I'm too set in my ways. But back then I didn't even think about doing anything else. And I still had to pay rent on that house. I had to pay like $250 a month was my cost for living in the master bedroom. I also thought that was a heck of a deal. So I was charging people $350 to be in each of the guest rooms. And then my net cost for that house on a monthly basis was like $250. And I got the master, which I felt like was a big win. But that's really how you do it, is you just kind of bootstrap your way up, or you get lucky and you buy Amazon stock back in 1992 or something like that.
I'm curious to hear from Laura. How many income streams do you have now? I know you could put it in the chat or
Okay.
say.
Oh, well, right now I only have like off and on businesses that I don't do that much. I just recently stopped a business, but as of August 11th, I will have one. And then as of September 6th, I will have two.
Good for you. Well, keep on plugging. I loved his idea of selling Cutco, because you're walking into a system where they train you, and David talked scripts early. It's just good to learn to talk to people, and your parents have a lot of friends with money that can buy knives. That might be a really good thing for you. Live at home, sell lots of knives, and then learn all you can about real estate. Maybe you can have your first property by 19 or 20. Maybe younger. Who's to say? Why would I limit you? So, Hector, there was another question from Craig Price in here.
Yeah, it was, at what point did you hire your first assistant? And I think there was another question a little earlier about delegation. Can you guys speak to how that's come up for you guys in your career or life?
Yeah, I think you should hire it as soon as you have work that pays more. Whoa, hey, what's going on there? As soon as you can make more money by doing other tasks than what an assistant does, is the moment you should hire an assistant. I hired my first one. I think I was making about 100, and I planned on paying her 25, but I ended up finding one that I had to pay 45 to. And so that ended up taking me from 100 down to 65. So I was barely making more than my assistant, but it was a game changer for me.
Yeah, it's always hard to say, but I think since this is a real estate agent question, most agents hire sooner than they probably should. They're lazy, right? I mean, I always did, I think I was doing 30, 40 deals before I had one, right? Like you know what I mean? You should be having your profit margin as high as humanly possible. And one of the ways to do that is to, do everything yourself. Now, you can't grow, you can't start building and start really getting into all the other elements of a good family life and a good health and all that. It's much more difficult when you're a workaholic. But I think you should be a workaholic first, and then start peeling off some of that to an assistant to help you get to the next level. So if you're looking for a specific question, I would probably say 30 deals, 30 to 40.
My take on that is I always thought I suck. I'm good at prospecting and listing homes right. And I want to delegate everything else I can as soon as I can. So, yeah. So, and you got to go out and make the money to do that. And you saw in the chat, I had made 70 my first year, hired an assistant that cost 48 grand, 4 weeks paid vacation. And then she freed me up to just prospect and sell. So find your lane and do what you do best and delegate the rest, and then hire right and let them do it. Don't micromanage. And that give the gift of the thought process of, I suck at some things and I just don't want to do them, or they're, so.
Yeah. I want to thank everybody for being on this call. We're coming up to the last several minutes. There are some questions in here. We'll see if we can get to them. But I'd encourage you guys. One, somebody in the chat, Jason Jackson, said he's taking Pat Hiban's online course. Both David and Pat have written books. David has written a book called Wealth Can't Wait, and Pat has written one called, I want to make sure I get it, it's 6 Steps to 7 Figures. And so I'd encourage you guys to go get those. And then the 3 amigos, Tim, David, and Pat, have written more recently a book called Tribe of Millionaires, which is a story about GoBundance. And so I'd also encourage you guys to go and check into that if you're looking for a group, to level up. And there's also a women's group for GoBundance. So there's that opportunity as well. But as we are coming up on the last couple of minutes here, any final thoughts, Pat, David, Tim, on anything that we talked about today?
I mean, for me, it's always the same thing. Just be purposeful with your life, man. Don't waste it. Be purposeful. That doesn't mean don't make mistakes. That doesn't mean you don't get into funks. That doesn't mean you get lost in kind of moments of indecision and procrastination. It just means ultimately in the big picture, long term, be purposeful, dust yourself up, get back up, look at your life, go, okay, what's working, what's not working, and start fixing stuff and moving forward and making progress. And, you know, the very easiest thing to do is just go for a walk or go for a run and start there if you can't think of anything else to do, and constantly overview your life and make sure you're being purposeful in all of the gardens of life.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing Tim and David and I all have in common is we're like we review our lives on a daily basis, and you know, and we've turned out pretty good because of it. So I think everybody can learn from that. And just the fact that you're on this call and that you spent this last hour with us shows that you're reviewing your life, because otherwise you would have hung up after 5 minutes, because that's what we've been talking about, is how to better your life. So so that's a great thing. You're on your way already.
Amen.
And the last thing I'd like to say is it's fun to do great things, but it's even funner to be part of great teams. And when you work on yourself and you're in a position where you can hold up your end, whether it's a marriage or a business or a, you know, whatever, just make sure you bring your A game to the table, because that's only fair to all concerned.
Absolutely.
Take it home, Hector.
Well, we just want to thank you for being here on our calls and come and hanging out with the One Life community. There are so many Zooms that you could be on, so many videos and trainings that you could be watching. And so the fact that you're spending some time with us, we are forever grateful for that. We'd encourage you, go get your One Life Roadmap Journal. There is an adult edition and there is a student edition available as well. So if you want to give it to someone younger, you know, a kid, your child, a niece, a nephew, grandkid, it's something that is great for someone who's still in school. And then if they're out of school, the adult edition, which is out today, is a great gift for them as well. So thank you guys.
I just bought mine. I got mine while we were on the call. I'm looking forward to receiving my One Life journal.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everybody. And all the reviews go really far. So even if you are not in a position to be able to buy one today, we would appreciate and love the review, because that will help just as much as well. And that is onelifefullylived.org/Amazon. It'll take you right there.